Course 3, Lesson 109, we are looking at consumer interest at just kind of a basic level and being able to calculate the different interest amounts for different situations. Understanding that credit card interest rate is typically higher than auto loan interest rates and higher than mortgage rates. So, to begin, if we look at this, when have you had to borrow money? Well, your parents have probably had to borrow money for different situations, and in your lifetime, you probably will too. One of the most common ones is a mortgage, which is money borrowed to buy a home. For example, you go and you look around at a bunch of different houses, and you end up wanting to buy this one that is $300,000. You go to ask for a loan, and they say, yeah, sure, we can give you a loan for $300,000 at a 7% fixed interest rate for 30 years, meaning you have 30 years to pay off your loan, and they're going to charge you 7% interest rate. Well, typically you might go and say, oh, 7% of $300,000, that's not much. But remember that compound interest works very differently. We're not going to actually get into all of the specifics of how that interest rate works, but we do know that after 30 years, you'll end up having to spend around $720,000 for that house. Because remember, being able to actually borrow money is going to cost you quite a bit of money. A bank, a loan company is not just going to give you that money for free and be like, oh yeah, that's just fine if you borrow our money for 30 years. No, you have to pay them something to actually borrow that money. In this case, 7% at 30 years is going to cost you about $420,000 to borrow that money. Kind of crazy. But maybe instead you said, you know what, I want to pay it off quicker, and I just want a 15-year loan. Well, you might actually end up saving some money, because even if you have that same interest rate, which typically there'll be a different interest rate for 15 years, but if you were to have the same interest rate, you'll pay it off sooner, in half the time, truly, and you might save some money, but you will have a larger monthly payment to pay it off quicker. Now, similar to that, you have auto loans, which same idea. You're borrowing money, so you have to be charged for borrowing that money. Typically, auto loans have higher interest rates, but for a lot shorter duration. Typically, we talk about them in months even. 36 months, 48, 60, 72 if you really need it. So let's say you were to buy a car for $20,000 at a 7.5% interest rate for a 36-month loan. Well, you would pay about, using all the calculations that we're not going to get into in this lesson, you'd pay about $622 per month, and that only is about $2,400 in interest that you end up paying over those 36 months. If you got that same car but used a 60-month loan, the payment would definitely be lower because you're spending more time paying off the same car, but you would end up paying more interest because you're being loaned this money for a longer amount of time. So your monthly payment would go down for about $400, but it would cost you an extra $4,000 to pay over that longer period of time. So it's always better to go with, if you can afford it, a shorter loan so that you don't have to pay as much interest on your loan. Lastly, credit card interest, probably the highest interest rate of anything, and depending on what type of credit card you get, it could be hugely high interest rates. So most of the time, if you pay in full when you buy things, if at the end of the month you spend $500 and you pay that right away, you won't be charged interest. And that's why a lot of people do end up using credit cards. They can buy things and then at the end of the month, one lump sum to pay it off. But how credit cards actually get their money, get profit, is from people that don't pay it off at the end of the month. Most of the time you might have a interest rate of 1.5% to 2%, but it can get really high really quick, up into the double digits as far as interest rate. What happens with these credit cards is, say you buy $500 worth of stuff, and then at the end of the month, you're given a choice. Either pay in full, so you actually pay off the $500, or you only pay, let's say, $30 for that month. Great, awesome. Why not just pay $30? Well, the reason is, yes, you only pay $30, but then you get charged interest on your $500 that you spent. And it rolls over to the next month and the next month, and the interest rate continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger because you're not paying off that loan. You're ending up creating a loan for yourself that has very high interest rates, and you can get yourself into a lot of trouble very quickly if you only do the small payment. If you're going to do a credit card, just pay in full. Okay, that's what it's there for, but you definitely don't want to pay the interest rate. Let's say this person, Jason, did go and get a credit card, and at the end of the month, he has a balance that he hasn't paid of $1,200. So this credit card charges 2% interest monthly on that unpaid balance. Well, let's answer a couple questions about this. What is the interest charge on Jason's current balance? Well, that's just a simple question as far as saying if he has $1,200 that he needs to pay off and he's getting charged 2% as a decimal, 0.02, well, then that means his interest charge for that current balance is, and you can work this out for yourself, $24. That's not too bad right now, but it grows and grows and grows. And I don't know about you, but I would rather keep my $24 rather than paying it in interest. Let's say he had to pay some hospital bills recently, and so he doesn't have the money to pay off the $1,200. He's just going to go for the minimum payment. That happens. Life happens. So if Jason makes only the minimum payment each month, what will his balance be that he carries over? Well, what we're saying is that if he has this $1,224 to pay, but he decides only to go for the $50, how much does he have to pay for the next month? Well, subtracting that, we would say his carryover balance is $1,174. That's what he would carry over to the next month if he only paid $50. So with the same situation, if he makes the next month only the minimum payment and makes an additional $800 in purchases, what will be his approximate balance after the next month's interest is applied? Well, the reason that we're saying approximate is because depending on when he made those purchases, he may not have that 2% interest on it or not. We don't actually know. So we're going to make a range. We're going to say it's going to be about this amount. Well, first of all, we need to figure out on that $1,174 that he hasn't paid off, we're still going to have to pay interest on that. So we need another 2%, which gives us, and take a second, pause the video and work this out, $23.48. So he's going to have to pay interest on that, and potentially he could have to pay interest on the $800 as well. Once again, depending on when he made that purchase, he may or may not have to pay the interest yet. It could be in this month, it could be in next, based on the billing cycle. We don't know. We're just going to say if he did buy it within the correct window and has to pay interest, it would be $16 of interest. So, depending on his charges, he either has to pay $1,174 plus the $800 plus, we'll round this to 24. So he could have $1,998 as his balance, or it could be this $1,174 plus 800 plus 24 and 16 to get us to $2,014. So it could be either one of these amounts or anywhere in between. So maybe we say it's around $2,000, but probably a little bit more than that. That's how we would end up saying it's about $2,000 that's going to be rolled over to the next month. Okay, so let's look at some other situations. Most of these are going to be about what's the difference between different interest rates, or what's the difference between their interest charges, things like that. So these two families, both chose a 30-year mortgage, both bought $300,000 homes. One loan, they had a 6% interest rate and paid $1,800 per month. So that's family one. Family two, same situation but with 7% interest rate, and they had to pay $2,000 per month. So what's the difference in the interest charges over the life of the loan? Well, we don't actually care about these percentages anymore. Those just told us what those monthly payments were going to be based on the complicated mathematics that happen at those banks or loan companies. What we really need to care about is that for 30 years, so 360 months, family one paid $1,800 a month, family two paid $2,000 a month. So let's see what their total was that they actually paid for this. And so let's do that. 1,800 times 360. Take a second to pause the video and actually work out that math just like I am. Okay, go ahead and take a second to do that for both of these. And you should get these numbers. So family one paid $648,000 for their home, and family two $720,000 for their home. So when we find the difference between these two homes, we end up seeing that family two spent $72,000 more just because of that pesky 1% difference that they had when they bought their home. Makes a difference. That's why you want a good credit score. It can make a huge amount of difference. Okay, similar idea, but we are looking at the difference between a 15-year mortgage and a 30-year mortgage. So once again, if you can afford 15-year mortgage, do it. Even though it's a higher approximate payment per month, over the life of the loan, you save a lot, and we're going to see how much in just a second. So for the 15 years, that's 180 months. So for 180 months, they paid $2,700 on this $30,000 mortgage at 7%. And for 30 years, so 360 months, we could pay $2,000. So depending on what is available for you, what your family can do, you would choose one of these two options. Well, let's see what the difference is by the end of the loan. So for 180 months, we have to pay $2,700. And for 360 months, we pay $2,000. Now, you should already have that figure from before for that 2,000 times 360. That's $720,000. Go ahead and pause the video to try out 2,700 times 180. You will get $486,000. That is a huge, huge difference. And when we do actually find the difference between the two of these, by subtracting, of course, you will see that there is a difference of $234,000. That's why I say it is amazingly different if you can choose the 15 years. If you can afford doing $2,700 a month, you will save $234,000. All right, just a couple more here. I think 2, maybe 3. All right, so 2 friends each had an auto loan of $20,000. One was repaid at 8% in 3 years, or about $625 per month, and the other 8% still, but 5 years to do it at $405 per month. Okay, so the total payments for a 5-year loan is how much more than total payments of the 3-year loan. So just like we did with the mortgage payments above, let's figure out for 5 years or 60 months how much it cost for $405 for each of those 60 months. And we're also going to do that for 3 years, but in this case, $625 for only 36 months. So let's see what those figures come out to be. Take a second. multiply it out. For the first one, you'll get $24,300. And the second one, you will get $22,500. From this, we can subtract those two amounts. So 24,300 minus 22,000. And since we have a smaller loan, there is going to be a smaller difference. But if I were you, if you can afford to do $625 per month, you're going to save $1,800. And I would definitely like to keep $1,800 rather than paying it in interest. So I would go for the 3-year loan. All right. So similar idea, but now different interest rates. So 8% or 9%. Doesn't seem like that much difference, but let's see how much more interest we would have to pay comparing the two. So if we have a 5-year auto loan, let's take my $405 for 60 months, see how much that is, compared to $415 at 60 months. You'll see in the end when we do this, and I don't actually even have to figure out what those figures are, I could say the difference between the two payments is $10 for 60 months. And I would see there's a difference of $600 between the 2% amounts. And last question here. So find the monthly interest charge on $12,000 credit card balance. That's a lot of money that you spend on that credit card at 2% per month. So if you have a charge in your bank and you're not paying it off, what interest is it going to charge you for 2%? So we're going to take my $12,000 times 2%. When you work that out, and please do, you end up with $240 in interest. Just interest. You're not even getting anything for those $240 other than being able to borrow money. And if I do this for an entire year, how much is it going to be? Well, this is not quite as simple as this, but if you wanted a general amount of how much it would be, we could say, well, if we keep that amount and not spend any more, even though, yes, we have typically compound interest, it's going to be around $2,880 in interest, but probably closer to $3,000 with compound interest. Okay, I believe that's all I have for this lesson. Hopefully you take away some really important life skills as far as being able to choose between different loans and how much money you can either save or how much money you're going to end up spending depending on the different loan amounts. I hope this helps for your homework and for studying.